Hello everyone, welcome to another rant video. I didn't think I'd be doing another one of these so soon, but I just sort of felt inspired to sit down and talk about nonsense for about 10 minutes, so that's what I'm going to do. And this rant is going to be about releasing unfinished games. That's always been a thing that's happened throughout, video game history, but it's become a particular topic of interest and discussion as of late because of Cyberpunk 2077. And for good reason. It had one of the most disastrous releases I've ever seen. And, I'm just gobsmacked at how the game turned out. Before I actually get into the details though, I should probably mention a few things. Firstly, this video is unscripted, so if it sounds like I have no idea what I'm talking about and I'm making things up on the fly, that's because that's exactly what I'm doing. I've only got, a couple of notes in front of me, that's all I've got to work off of, so if this is not entertaining, bear with me. The other thing, I'm not an expert on this sort of thing. I'm not an industry person, I'm not experienced in the industry in any way. So if I say something that isn't true or is ignorant to the reality of what's going on, do mention it in the comments because, I would like to be well informed. I've tried to do a bit of research beforehand about this topic, but, I could have missed out on a few things or missed some important details, so do let me know if I get anything wrong. And lastly, if you enjoy yourself, hit that subscribe button because it's very satisfying to do, and I love it when people do that. And also hit that like button while you're down there because it glows like this really nice blue color. You should totally check it out. It's really nice. But yeah, releasing unfinished games. Now, if you've been paying attention to the industry as of late, you would have known that Cyberpunk was supposed to be a really big deal. It's, it was supposed to be one of the most anticipated, one of the best games of the year, of the decade even. But if you've been paying attention, over the last couple of weeks, you would know that it's an absolute shit show what happened with Cyberpunk. And it's like, I was never personally interested in the game. I didn't see what was so, exciting about it. I never understood it, and I was never going to buy it, and I still haven't. And I'm glad I didn't because of the way it turned out. But, I didn't really understand what the hype was about it. But even still, as someone who had rarely even given Cyberpunk a thought, I'm still absolutely gobsmacked at what happened with it. It turned out to be, overflowing with bugs, with glitches, with technical issues, and, that frustrated a lot of people, and, rightly so. Which is just astounding, because before its release at all these conventions like E3 and Gamescom and all that, it was so heavily praised. It was, nominated and won awards for the most anticipated game and all that. And I'm pretty sure a lot of gaming journalists and all that praised the game for its quality. And so with all that, you'd never think that it would turn out the way that it did. And I'm sure on PS5, Xbox Series X and PC, it's not as bad, but the, PS4 and Xbox One releases were absolutely terrible. I've seen clips of things, on the internet of, traffic exploding and flying off into the air, people clipping through the ground, people clipping through the ground, NPCs behaving weirdly, textures not loading, models not loading. It's just disgusting to look at. It's actually revolting. So yeah, I don't understand how it could have gone so wrong when it was hyped up to be this amazing game. It was supposed to be, the biggest game of the decade or whatever, and it was just released in a terrible state. And obviously the Cyberpunk team, they apologized and would promise that they would fix the game with patches in the months to come. And I think that's just it's a terrible thing to happen, because you would think that they would know that the game is not in a state that can be released, but they released it anyway, and are now apologising for that quite obvious mistake. And they've gone as far as to offer refunds to literally everyone. Even Sony had to take matters into their own hands and take the game off of the PlayStation Store, until further notice. Like, it's gotta be bad when Sony themselves has to take matters into its own hands and remove this third-party game from the PlayStation Store and offer refunds. It's just incredible. I believe the game sold around 13 million copies, which, considering the state that it's in, it's totally undeserved. Like, there is no conceivable way that the developers or the play testers or anyone who is involved with the game could have looked at the state of it and went, yep, this is perfect for release. Like, surely they must have known. They must have known that releasing the game in the state that it was in, riddled with bugs, riddled with glitches, borderline unplayable in some situations. Surely they must have known that releasing that and expecting things to go smoothly was a ridiculous notion. And, I don't understand, they must have been well aware of the state the game that was in, because they were working on it. They were involved with it from start to finish on all platforms. They must have known that it was not going to be suitable for release, and the fact that they decided to release it anyway is laughable. And, on the one hand, I do feel a bit bad for the development team, because, they obviously put a lot of work into the game. It's been in development for quite a long time, I think. And they were probably pressured by, higher-ups and executives to get the game out as soon as possible, especially around the holiday season. But, on the other hand, it's a disaster that everyone involved with Cyberpunk created for themselves. It's no one else's fault but their own. They got themselves into this mess by releasing the game as soon as they did. They definitely shouldn't have done that. There's this quote from Shigeru Miyamoto, who's the creator of Mario, that a lot of people reference when something like this happens in the gaming industry. And that quote is, "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad." Or it's something along those lines. And, a classic example of that is Sonico 6. Sonico 6 was, I believe it was the celebration of the 10th anniversary or 15th anniversary or something for the Sonic series. I think it was 15th. And, it turned out badly. Had it had been delayed, it could have turned out pretty good, because, there's some solid concepts there, but they just didn't have the time or the resources. Well, I don't know about resources, but they didn't have the time to execute it properly. So because the game was rushed so it could be released in time for whenever their deadline was, it turned out terribly, and there's no way they can go back to it. The game is out, it's been released, it was released in the state that it was in, they can't go back and fix it. They rushed it, and that's what they've done. That's all that's came out of it. That's the end of that. There's no salvaging it. I guess in the modern industry, that quote isn't exactly as true as it would be back when, Miyamoto said it, because there are things like post-release patches and updates that have become more common, so even the most rushed of games can eventually be fixed to a state that's, acceptable and playable. And, I assume that's what Cyberpunk is trying to do right now. But, I still think the core idea of that quote still holds a fair bit of weight. Because Cyberpunk is just... the whole Cyberpunk situation is not going to be one that's going to be forgotten anytime soon. It should have been delayed until it was in a state where it could have lived up to all the expectations surrounding it. And, that way the whole ordeal could have been avoided, and there wouldn't have been any need for patches and updates to fix the disaster. But instead, they decided to release the game in a terrible state, and now they've dug themselves into this hole that they most likely won't ever be able to fully climb out of, because this whole shit show has completely damaged the reputation of the developers and all the people involved with Cyberpunk, because of the whole, the secrecy, the whole mess, you know, their reputation is damaged because of it. And, you know, I'm sure the rest of the video game industry has been paying attention to what's going on with Cyberpunk. And, you know, that's sort of a silver lining for the whole thing. Because I'm hoping that, you know, AAA studios and developers and publishers will take everything that's gone on board and only release games when they're ready to be released. So I'm sort of thankful in that regard that Cyberpunk fucked up in the way it did. Obviously, I feel bad for the people who spent money on the game and are disappointed with their purchase. Hopefully, that their I'm hoping that their refunds work out, because it's not a cheap game. It is quite expensive. I also hope that the developers, that they can get through all this okay, because I'm sure most of it wasn't their fault. I can almost guarantee you that it was probably some executives or higher ups that forced the game to be released in the way it was. So I do feel bad for the developers, and I hope they can get out of it okay. But hopefully this will also encourage other developers and publishers to prioritize quality over just getting the game out for sales. You know, and maybe it'll even be a step towards phasing out, you know, the whole day one patch thing or forced downloads. Because, you know, the way I see it, when you buy a game, you should get the complete package finished the way it was intended to be experienced and played, rather than only buying the game and getting some of it, or getting an incomplete product with, you know, a forced patch or download later down the road to, you know, then fix the issue. Things like additional DLC I'm fine with, because that's just adding on to what the experience was supposed to be. That's just additional stuff. But when, you know, DLC is used to fix problems, when you have to pay for things to get the whole package, I don't like that. So hopefully that'll go away. Day one patches, I kind of understand that, because, you know, obviously the physical copies of games need to be distributed across the world for retail, and, you know, that has to happen I'm pretty sure it has to happen, you know, at least a month in advance. So obviously the game wouldn't be finished when it's shipped out for retail. So a day one patch I understand. I don't like seeing it, but I totally get why it's there. But yeah, I just hope that the rest of the industry is taking notes to not rush games for sales, but instead to ensure that there is some level of quality so that people can enjoy what they paid for. Because at the end of the day, people are paying for the experience. And, you know, if you pump out games that are shit and people don't like them and they're, you know, terrible quality, technical issues, bugs, glitches all over the shop, people aren't going to want to buy any more games from that studio or from that publisher. And, you know, it doesn't need to be a perfect game without bugs or glitches. Like, one example I always think of is Skyrim. Skyrim is riddled with bugs as well. But, you know, it's a complete package. It's been released multiple times over the last 10 years. And it's an enjoyable game. It's a finished product. It's not, you know, it doesn't have as many technical issues, bugs or glitches as what I'm seeing from Cyberpunk. So it's okay to release that game because it was in a finished state and it could be experienced. Even though it's not perfect, I'm more than happy to buy the next Elder Scrolls game because I enjoyed my time with Skyrim and I think it's a pretty quality game, even despite its bugs and glitches. But when the bugs and glitches and technical issues are so severe that you can't look past them, like the way they are in Cyberpunk, people aren't going to want to buy your games anymore. So I think that's another thing for, you know, developers and studios to take note of, is that even if you don't think a game is the best quality, but you release it anyway, people will take note of that. They will take note of the studio that made it and will be hesitant to buy another game from them. So, yeah, there are a lot of lessons to be learned, but the main thing is, don't release games when they're unfinished, like what happened with Cyberpunk, because it will just end up a complete disaster, and it'll be the only thing anyone talked about for, you know, months to come. That's what I find really profound about it, is that so many people were talking about Cyberpunk. It's almost hilarious that so many people were hyping up Cyberpunk, so many people were talking about it, and it just turned out to be a shit show. Like, that's the only word I can think of to describe it. It was a shit show. Anyway, I think I've rambled on enough. Yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't know if this is going to be entertaining. I just kind of wanted to ramble about this because, you know, it's sort of been on my mind ever since Cyberpunk released. I don't know if that's a good thing. It's probably a bad thing because almost all of it has been negative. But I do think there is a silver lining in there somewhere. So I hope the industry will take note of what's happened. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, if you haven't done it, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you should probably get yourself checked out. And yeah, I'll see you next time.